Welcome back, I'm Austin and I'm ranking all the ARs, LMGs, and marksman rifles from Call of Duty Vanguard and Warzone from meta to garbage tier. I'm going to be mainly talking about fire rate, recoil, and mag size for this when I'm talking about if they're going to be meta or garbage. And the MG42 is going to check all those boxes off to be good with a 1034 fire rate, which is going to be the best LMG in this game in that category, as well as the second best in Warzone overall, behind only the Finn with the adverse barrel. So that's going to make it really easy to use, which is going to throw it up in the meta or competitive section, because if we think about it, weapons in the past that have been meta have all been easy to use for the most part. If we think about it, Kilo, Grau, Krig, MG82, which this gun is super similar to. So this thing is also going to have a pretty low recoil and a 125 round base magazine. So I'm starting between putting it in competitive or meta. But I'm going to throw it down in competitive right now just because of this next gun, the DP27, probably the most busted weapon in multiplayer currently, which is a pretty good tell on if a weapon is going to be good or not in Warzone. If you can remind me the last time a weapon was OP in multiplayer and not good in Warzone, please leave it in the comments. This thing has an 800 round fire rate, it also has no recoil and is a laser beam, and you can have an extended mag which is 105 rounds. If you actually look at the past, Warzone meta weapons are typically between 7 to 900 rounds per minute for the most part. What that means is it's easiest to control the recoil when the fire rate is a little slower, but if it gets too slow, then it's really unforgiving to use. So that's why 800 is the perfect thing. The MG's 1034 rounds per minute is really going to hurt its recoil even though it's low, but the gun firing so fast, it does make it a little bit more difficult to control. And now I'm going to skip over the STG because that's an AR and I'm just trying to finish the LMGs here. So the Type 11, probably the ugliest weapon I've ever seen in my life. You probably can't tell from this picture, so I'm just going to throw it up on screen right now. It's like a left-handed gun that covers your entire screen and a 30 round base mag. You're going to think this thing's going to be in garbage. But you can get a 90 round extended mag, and then you can also put on an optic, which then makes the gun a lot less ugly and sort of centers the gun out on your screen and doesn't block off half of your field of vision. It does get a little bit better. I'm going to throw it in viable because this thing still kind of hits like a truck and has a 750 round per minute fire rate, which obviously, as I just said, is kind of in that meta fire rate. I think this thing could end up being competitive, but if I'm ranking it across the other LMGs, I would definitely level up the DP27 and MG42 first. At least it should be usable. Now the Bren, I'm just going to come out straight and say it, this thing's garbage. It has a 600 fire rate, which you can say, oh, the AK-47 from Cold War has that fire rate. It's meta, probably the most popular gun in Warzone currently because you can use it across all situations. But this thing also has some pretty hefty recoil. The difference is it's going to be a slow-moving LMG that's unforgiving. Even if it has a 100 round mag, there's just no reason to ever use this thing over these other three LMGs. Don't even worry about it. It might get buffed eventually to be good. Throw it down here. Don't use it, dude. I hated this thing when I tried to use it in multiplayer. Now if we go down here, I'm going to skip over the STG again because I'm going to go to the three marksman rifles first. And the M1 Garand, I just think it's going to be kind of a niche weapon, and I'm going to tell you why. It has 300 rounds per minute. That is incredibly slow, while only having a 16 round mag, which is just atrocious. Like, how are you supposed to use that effectively? Because you gotta think there's gonna be like a DMR or Type 63, but those weapons could have 30, 40 round mags. This thing is 16 rounds. There's just no way to use that effectively. I'm gonna call it niche because it can still kill people insanely quickly if you hit your shots, but I just don't see it being viable. And that's gonna be kind of the same thing with the SVT because you're gonna go like 15 round mag, 400 rounds per minute. It's in the same ballpark as this. Now the G43, I think, could be a viable weapon right here. It does have 600 rounds per minute, but once again, it only has a 20 round mag. So that's going to be a little bit of an issue. I kind of want to call it niche, but the G43 is going to be better than the M1 Garand or the SVT. And if I had to rank them, I would probably just throw them in the order of their fire rates, 600, 400, 300. Now the G43, I think in the right hands could be considered viable, but the 20 round mag is just killing it for me. So I'm going to put it in niche, but take it with a grain of salt. The G43 could be good. Now let's actually get over to these assault rifles, and the STG's already been in the game. And the fun fact about this is it actually has the same TTK as the AK at close and long range. So maybe it will be good, but I mean, have we seen anyone using this over the AK-47 in multiplayer currently? Maybe they'll end up buffing it. I'm just gonna call it viable. Like, it's definitely usable, but I just don't see the reason to use it over the Cold War AK. Now the Automaton, this thing right here, S tier. This might be the best gun to come out of Vanguard multiplayer, and I'll tell you why. This thing is an absolute laser beam, probably the most accurate thing I've ever seen in my life in a multiplayer game. We gotta think, like I said, ease of use is a key thing to make weapons meta. This is gonna be like the Krig or the Kilo or the Grau coming out of Vanguard, and we can have a 60 round mag on it, so that's already really nice. We also have a really good fire rate at 833 rounds per minute. It's optimal for meta because it's really easy to use. I think this is gonna be the #1 thing you should level up in Warzone currently. Now the Itra Burst, I'm gonna come out and say it right away, just like the Bren, this thing is straight garbage. We know how burst rifles work. They're either really good or really bad. Look at the M16 and AUG. They were completely busted in OP, then they nerfed them, and they kind of went to meh, and you can't really use them. So the Itra Burst, it is super accurate, but its fire rate isn't too hot. 588 rounds per minute, and you can only have a 32 round mag with the proper ammunition. So I just don't see a reason to ever use this thing right now. And now we're gonna move over to the bar. This is one that is a little bit tricky. It's a little bit tricky because it can go in a lot of areas. It can go below average all the way up to meta. But I'm gonna tell you what's holding back. So the base fire rate is 400. There are a lot of attachments where you can actually increase its fire rate, but the biggest mag size on it is 30 rounds, and it's gonna actually make the fire rate go down. So this thing's kind of like an EM2. Heavy hitting, slow firing. But you know what the EM2's fire rate is? 531, and that's already painfully slow because if you miss one bullet on the EM2, 113 milliseconds added to your TTK for every shot you miss. And this is even worse. You're going to probably have to build this a very specific way to get it to work, but if you throw on any of the fire rate attachments, the recoil is going to get worse and worse and worse, and you only have a 30 round mag. I don't know how they're going to make this thing work in Warzone. It's pretty good in multiplayer as a long range option. That's the only way you'll ever be able to use this in Warzone. But I'm just not seeing it right now. I'm gonna throw it in viable. Now the AS44, this is a gun that's a little tricky. The fire rate is quite nice on it. It's got a 900 fire rate. Now the 45 round mag is the one that's gonna be super accurate, and then the 60 round mag is gonna be the one that gets you a little bit more recoil because it adds to your fire rate. So this thing, I honestly think it's gonna be competitive, and I'm gonna tell you why. The fire rate is insanely good, but I think this is gonna be kind of one of your closer range ARs. It's actually been pretty slept on. The Milano is a long range build with the 3X, but this would be a weapon that you could pair with that. I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as the Automaton, the DP27, or MG42. I'm tossing between viable and competitive. Throw it in competitive for now, but you're going to have to use it as a sub and not an AR. Now this NZ41, this one does kind of throw me for a loop. I'm thinking anywhere from viable to meta, and I'm going to tell you why. If you throw on its 45 round mag, the fire rate will go to 645. Its base fire rate's like only 500 something. I can't recall exactly what it is. And it's also really minor recoil. And it reminds me a lot of the AMAX from when it was meta. A good sniper support or a good long range option. I'm gonna throw it in competitive right now ahead of the AS44. And I think it's worse than the MG42, so I'm gonna throw it right there in the middle. I think this thing's gonna be really good, but I would still definitely use the Automaton or DP27 over it, level it up. Now the Volk, I'm just gonna come out, throw it in S tier. This is probably gonna be the new AK-47 for sniper support ARs. Got a 60 round mag, 750 rounds per minute, as well as being a laser. Now the damage does drop off a little bit at range, which is why I'm thinking sniper support and not long range AR. This is what you're going to want to pair with your Swiss or your Kar 98. This is the order you should prioritize leveling up your weapons for Warzone, with the Automaton being the #1 priority. Now if you want to see the SMGs all the way to the snipers ranked, click on this video right now. Peace.